The shuttle landed in the backyard of a small house on the edge of a quiet town. The grass bent under the weight of the alien craft, and a few birds flew away in surprise. Inside the house, Ben stood by the window and watched the ship settle onto his lawn. He had been waiting for this moment for 3 weeks, ever since the Terran Federation had asked him and his wife to host an alien ambassador for a cultural exchange visit. Ben was 62 years old. He had gray hair and kind eyes, and he walked with a slight limp from an old injury he got during his years working in space logistics. His wife stood beside him, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She was a few years younger than Ben, with short brown hair and a warm smile that made everyone feel welcome. "They are here," Ben said simply. Nodded and took a deep breath. "I made tea and coffee. I hope they can drink one of those." The shuttle door opened with a soft hiss. A ramp extended down to the grass, and the first figure emerged into the morning sunlight. Ambassador Al was tall and covered in smooth green scales that shimmered slightly when the light hit them. She had large amber eyes with vertical pupils, and her hands had 4 fingers each, tipped with short claws. She wore long robes of dark blue fabric, decorated with silver patterns that showed her rank and status among her people. They were one of the species to join the alliance with Earth. There was a hot, rocky planet far across the galaxy. They were known for their strict culture and their love of order and discipline. Everything in society had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was done without reason. Ben walked out to meet the ambassador. He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting, and Al studied it for a moment before copying the motion. Her grip was firm but careful. "Welcome to our home," Ben said. "We are honored to have you here." "The honor is mine," Al replied. Her voice was a series of clicks and hisses, but the small device on her collar translated her words into clear English. "I thank you for opening your dwelling to me." Then Ben noticed movement behind the ambassador. 3 small figures were huddled at the top of the shuttle ramp, peeking out with wide eyes. They were clearly children, much smaller than Al, with softer scales and rounder faces. They clung to each other and stared at the strange world around them with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I must apologize," Al said, following Ben's gaze. "My cubs were not supposed to come with me on this visit, but their caretaker became ill this morning, and I had no choice but to bring them along. Among my people, cubs are never left alone during their early development phase." Ben smiled warmly. "There is no need to apologize. We raised 3 children of our own. This house has seen plenty of little ones running around." He waved at the cubs and they ducked behind the shuttle doorway. Only their eyes remained visible, watching him carefully. Had come outside by now. She stood beside her husband and looked at the small aliens with a soft expression on her face. "Oh, they are precious," she said quietly. "Look at how scared they are, poor little things." Al made a clicking sound that might have been a sigh. "They have never been to an alien world before. Everything here is strange to them. The colors, the smells, the sounds. They do not know what to expect." "Well, let us make them feel at home," said. She walked slowly toward the shuttle ramp, keeping her movements calm and gentle. She crouched down so she was closer to the cubs' height and smiled at them. "Hello there," she said softly. "My name is What are your names?" The cubs looked at each other. The largest one, who had darker green scales and a serious expression, spoke first. Her translator turned her chirps into words. I am the eldest." The middle cub, slightly smaller with bright curious eyes, spoke next. "I am." The smallest cub, barely bigger than a human toddler, pressed himself against his sister's side. He had lighter scales, almost yellow-green, and his eyes were the biggest of all 3. He did not speak. "And who is this little one?" asked gently. "That is," said, "he is shy. He does not speak to strangers." Nodded with understanding. "That is perfectly fine. He can speak when he feels ready." She stood up and gestured toward the house. "Would you all like to come inside? I have made some food and drinks. You must be tired from your journey." Al guided her cubs down the ramp. They walked in a tight group, staying as close to their mother as possible, held onto the edge of her robe with both hands, his small claws gripping the fabric tightly. The inside of the house was unlike anything the cubs had ever seen. The buildings were made of stone and metal. The walls were always smooth and hard. The colors were always gray and brown and sometimes black. Everything was built for function, not for beauty. But this human house was different. The walls were painted in soft colors. There were pictures hanging everywhere, showing smiling faces and beautiful landscapes. Soft furniture filled the rooms, covered in fabric that looked comfortable and inviting. Colorful objects sat on shelves and tables, serving no obvious purpose except to look nice. Looked around with wide eyes. "Why do they have so many decorations?" she whispered to her brother. "What is the function of all these objects?" Shook his head slowly. "I do not know. Perhaps humans value things that have no function. That is very strange." Said nothing. He was too busy staring at everything. The soft carpet under his feet felt strange and wonderful. Back home, floors were always hard and cold. But this floor was warm and gentle, and his clawed toes sank into it slightly with each step. Led them to the living room, where Ben had already set out cups and plates. "Please, sit down and make yourselves comfortable," she said. Al lowered herself onto one of the soft chairs, and her eyes widened slightly at how it cushioned her body. On her world, chairs were rigid and straight. Sitting was not meant to be comfortable. It was meant to keep the body alert and ready. "This seating is very unusual," she said carefully. "It seems designed for relaxation rather than readiness." Ben chuckled. "That is exactly right. After a long day of work, there is nothing better than sinking into a comfortable chair." The cubs sat on the floor near their mother's feet. They were still too nervous to try the human furniture. Kept looking around the room, his eyes moving from one strange object to another. He saw a box with a glass front that showed moving pictures. He saw a tall plant with green leaves growing from a pot of dirt. He saw shelves full of paper objects that called books. Everything was new, everything was strange, and everything was somehow wonderful. Brought out the food she had prepared. There were small sandwiches cut into triangles and bowls of fruit and cups of juice in different colors. She had researched biology before the visit and made sure everything was safe for their guests to eat. "Please help yourselves," she said warmly. The cubs looked at their mother for permission. Al nodded, and they carefully reached for the food, picked up a sandwich and sniffed it before taking a small bite. Her eyes went wide. "It is soft," she said with surprise, "and it has so many flavors mixed together." The food was simple and plain. Meals were meant to provide energy, nothing more. The idea of food that was meant to taste good was new and exciting to the young cubs. While the adults began their discussion about culture and customs, the cubs ate quietly and continued to look around the room. Had finished his juice and was now staring at the hallway that led deeper into the house. He wondered what other strange and wonderful things the humans kept hidden in their dwelling. He did not know it yet, but he was about to discover something that would change his understanding of the universe forever. Something simple, something ordinary, something that humans took for granted every single day. A laundry basket was waiting for him, just around the corner. The adults talked for a long time. Ambassador Al asked many questions about human life. She wanted to know how humans organized their families, how they educated their young, and how they spent their time when they were not working. Ben answered patiently, explaining things that seemed normal to them but were very strange to the visitor. The cubs grew restless and tried to sit still and be quiet like proper children but could not stop fidgeting. His eyes kept drifting to the hallway. There was something down there. He could feel it. Something interesting was waiting to be found. Finally, when no one was looking, slipped off the floor and crawled toward the hallway. His small claws made soft clicking sounds on the wooden floor, but the adults were too busy talking to notice. Saw him go, and her eyes went wide with worry. She hissed quietly, "Come back here, you will get in trouble." But did not listen. He was already around the corner out of sight. Looked at, they exchanged a silent conversation with their eyes, the way siblings often do. Then they both stood up and followed their little brother. They could not let him explore alone. What if he broke something? What if he got lost? What if there was danger? The hallway was narrow and lined with more pictures on the walls. Paid no attention to them. He was focused on a door at the end of the hall. It was open just a crack, and a soft light came from inside. He pushed the door open with his snout and stepped into the room beyond. It was a small room with a big white machine against one wall and another big white machine next to it. There was a counter with bottles of colorful liquid on it, and the whole room had a strange but pleasant smell. Did not know what any of these things were, but that was not what caught his attention. In the middle of the floor sat a large basket. It was round and tall, made of woven material that had never seen before. The sides had patterns in them, created by the way the strips of material crossed over and under each other. Inside the basket were piles of soft fabric in many colors. Walked toward it slowly. His heart was beating fast. He had never seen anything like this object. On his world, containers were made of metal or stone or hard plastic. They were solid and heavy and cold to the touch. But this container was different. It looked almost alive, the way the woven strips curved and bent. He reached out one small clawed hand and touched the side of the basket. It moved slightly under his touch, then bounced back to its original shape, gasped with surprise and pulled his hand back. Then he touched it again, pressing harder this time. The basket wall bent inward, but it did not break. It just flexed and moved with his pressure. "What is this thing?" he whispered to himself, and appeared in the doorway behind him. They had finally caught up. "What are you doing?" demanded. "Mother will be angry if she finds out you wandered off." But was not listening. He was too amazed by his discovery. "Look at this," he said, pointing at the basket. "Come and see, you have to feel it." Walked closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. He studied the basket with careful eyes, walking around it in a slow circle. "The construction is remarkable," he said. "Look at how the strips are woven together. They lock into each other, creating a structure that is both flexible and strong. This is very clever engineering." "But what is it for?" asked. She had come closer now too, though she still looked nervous. Reached into the basket and pulled out one of the soft fabric items inside. It was white and fluffy, and when he held it to his face, it smelled clean and fresh. "I think these are some kind of covering," said. "Maybe humans wrap themselves in these for warmth." "That seems inefficient," said. "Why would they not just adjust the temperature of their dwelling?" Did not answer. He was too busy rubbing the soft fabric against his scales. It felt wonderful. Nothing on his felt like this. Everything there was rough or hard or cold, but this human fabric was soft and warm and gentle. Then did something that surprised even himself. He climbed into the basket. His siblings stared at him with shocked expressions. "What are you doing?" said her voice rising with alarm. "Get out of there right now. That belongs to the humans." But was already settling into the pile of soft fabric. He pushed the towels and cloths around, creating a little nest for himself in the center of the basket. Then he sat down, and the softness surrounded him on all sides. He had never felt anything like this before. The cubs slept on hard platforms covered with thin mats. Comfort was considered a weakness. Children were taught to endure discomfort without complaint. It made them stronger, the elders said. It prepared them for the challenges of life. But this was not uncomfortable. This was the opposite of uncomfortable. Felt safe and warm and protected, surrounded by the soft walls of the basket and the gentle cushion of the fabric beneath him. "It is like a nest," he said softly, but better than any nest I could imagine. Tilted his head. Despite his concerns, he was curious. What does it feel like? Come in and see for yourself, said. Hesitated. Then he carefully climbed over the edge of the basket and lowered himself inside. His eyes went wide as he settled into the soft fabric. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, this is very nice. Stood outside the basket, her arms crossed and her expression stern. Both of you need to get out of there right now. This is not proper behavior. We are guests in this home. We should not be climbing into the humans' belongings. But said, you have to try it, just for a moment, please. Shook her head firmly. No, I am the eldest. I must set a good example. But as she watched her brothers snuggle deeper into the soft towels, something strange happened. She started to feel curious. She started to wonder what it would be like to sit in there with them. The basket looked so warm and cozy, and her brothers looked so happy. Finally, with a heavy sigh, she gave in. Fine, but only for a moment. Then we are all going back to the living room. She climbed into the basket, and the moment she felt the softness surround her, her stern expression melted away. A small smile appeared on her face, though she tried to hide it. This is acceptable, she admitted quietly. The three cubs sat together in the laundry basket, surrounded by towels and washcloths and sheets. They did not speak for a while. They just enjoyed the feeling of being wrapped in softness, safe and warm in their unexpected discovery. Then got an idea. We should build a fortress, he said. His siblings looked at him with confusion. What is a fortress? Asked. I read about them in the files Mother gave us about Earth, explained. Humans used to build big structures to protect themselves from enemies. They called them fortresses or castles. They would hide inside and no one could hurt them. But we do not need protection from enemies, said. The humans are friendly. I know, said, but it could still be fun to build one, just to play. Frowned, play. Cubs do not play. Cubs learn and train and prepare for adulthood. Playing is a waste of time. Looked down at the towels in his hands. For a moment he felt sad. She was right, of course. On their world, children did not play. They studied and practiced and worked. Free time was spent on educational activities, not on silly games. But something about this basket made him want to be silly. Something about this soft, warm, wonderful basket made him want to do something just for fun, even if it served no practical purpose. Maybe the humans do things differently, he said quietly. Maybe playing is not always a waste of time. Looked thoughtful. That is an interesting hypothesis. Perhaps we should test it. Sighed again. She looked at her brothers and she saw the hope in their eyes. She knew she should say no. She knew she should make them go back to the living room and sit quietly like proper cubs. But she did not want to. For the first time in her young life, wanted to do something that had no purpose except to be enjoyable. Fine, she said at last. Let us build a fortress, but if Mother asks, this was All's idea. His face lit up with joy. He began pulling towels from the pile and draping them over the edges of the basket, creating walls and barriers. Helped him, using his analytical mind to figure out the best way to make the structure stable. Found herself arranging the interior, making a comfortable floor for them to sit on. They worked together, and soon the laundry basket was no longer just a container for dirty clothes. It was a fortress, a castle, a secret hideaway where three alien cubs could forget about rules and expectations and just have fun. And for the first time in their lives, the children of the collective learned what it meant to play. Had been a mother for 35 years. Her own children were grown now, with families of their own, living in different cities across the country. The house was quieter these days, and sometimes missed the sound of little feet running through the hallways and the laughter of children at play. She stood in the kitchen, preparing more snacks for their guests. The ambassador seemed to enjoy the fruit, so was cutting up some more apples and pears. Through the doorway, she could hear Ben and Al discussing the differences between human and education systems. It was an interesting conversation, but found herself wondering about the cubs. They had been so quiet during the discussion. Too quiet, perhaps. Children, no matter what planet they came from, were not usually so still for so long. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward the living room. Ben and Al were deep in conversation, and neither of them noticed her pass through. She looked at the spot where the cubs had been sitting, and her heart skipped a beat. The cubs were gone. Did not panic. She had raised 3 children after all. She knew that little ones had a habit of wandering off to explore. It was completely natural. But she also knew that the alien cubs might be scared or confused in this strange new environment, so she wanted to find them quickly. She walked down the hallway, checking each room as she passed. The bathroom was empty. The guest bedroom was empty. Then she reached the laundry room and stopped in her tracks. The door was open. Light spilled out into the hallway, and from inside the room came a sound that had not heard in many years. It was the sound of children giggling. She stepped closer and peeked around the doorframe. What she saw made her eyes go wide and her hand rise to cover her mouth. The laundry basket was in the middle of the floor, but it did not look like a laundry basket anymore. The cubs had transformed it into something wonderful. Towels hung over the edges like castle walls. A bed sheet was draped over the top like a roof. Inside, she could see the 3 alien children, their amber eyes glowing in the dim light of their makeshift fortress. Had found a wooden spoon somewhere, probably from the kitchen, and he was holding it up like a sword. He was speaking in a dramatic voice, though his translator turned his words into English. "I am the brave," he declared, "defender of the fortress. No enemy shall pass these walls." Was arranging small objects around the edge of the basket. He had found some spare buttons from sewing kit and was placing them in careful patterns. "These are our defensive systems," he explained to his sister. "If any attacker approaches, we will activate the shields." Was sitting in the center, a towel wrapped around her shoulders like a royal cape. Despite her earlier protests, she seemed to be enjoying herself. "I am the queen of this fortress," she announced, "and I declare that this is a day of peace. No battles will be fought today." Watched them for a long moment. Her eyes grew misty with emotion. These children had traveled across the galaxy from a world where play was not allowed, where everything had to have a purpose. And yet here they were, doing exactly what children everywhere had done since the beginning of time. They were using their imagination. They were creating worlds out of nothing. They were being kids. She stepped into the room and the cubs froze. Their eyes went wide with fear. Quickly dropped the wooden spoon and threw off her towel cape. They looked like they expected to be punished. "Please do not be angry," said quickly. Her voice trembled through the translator. "We are sorry. We did not mean to cause problems. We will clean everything up right away." Crouched down slowly, making herself smaller and less scary. She smiled at the cubs with all the warmth she had in her heart. "Angry?" she said gently. "Why would I be angry? This is wonderful." The cubs exchanged confused looks. "You are not displeased?" asked carefully. "We have taken your belongings and rearranged them. We have repurposed your storage container. On our world, this would be considered very disrespectful." Shook her head. "On our world, this is called playing, and it is one of the most important things children can do." She looked at the laundry basket with fond eyes. "You know, this old basket has had many lives. My children used to play with it too when they were small. It has been a spaceship flying through the stars. It has been a boat sailing across the ocean. It has been a race car, a time machine, and a secret hideout. And now it is a fortress. I think that is a very good use for it." Stared at her with wonder. "Your children also did this. They turned ordinary objects into imaginary things." "All the time," said. "That is what children do. They see possibilities everywhere. A cardboard box becomes a rocket. A blanket becomes a cave. A stick becomes a magic wand. The world is full of adventures if you know how to look for them. The cubs were silent, processing this new information. On their world, children were taught to see things as they were, not as they could be. Imagination was not encouraged. It was considered a distraction from practical learning. "I do not understand," said slowly. "What is the purpose of pretending? How does it help us prepare for adulthood?" Sat down on the floor, crossing her legs. She was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that came so naturally to her. "When children play pretend," she said, "they are practicing for life. When pretends to be a brave defender, he is learning about courage. When builds defensive systems, he is learning about problem solving. When you pretend to be a queen, you are learning about leadership and responsibility." She leaned forward slightly. "But more than that, playing teaches children how to be creative. It teaches them that the world does not have to be only what it is. It can be what we imagine it to be. And that is a very powerful idea." Was listening with his mouth slightly open. No one had ever told him anything like this before. On his world, he had always been told that imagination was useless, that daydreaming was a waste of mental energy, that good children focused on reality, not fantasy. But now a kind human woman was telling him the opposite. She was telling him that imagination was valuable, that playing was important, that it was okay to see a laundry basket and imagine it was a fortress. "I like playing," he said softly. "It makes me feel happy." Smiled at him. "That is exactly how it should make you feel." She stood up and looked around the room. Then she walked to a closet in the corner and opened the door. Inside were shelves stacked with linens and blankets. "If you are going to build a proper fortress," she said, "you will need better materials." She pulled out a large, fluffy blanket and brought it to the cubs. Then she went back and got more blankets, more pillows, and even an old sleeping bag that had belonged to one of her sons. "Here," she said, spreading the supplies on the floor. "Now you can build the best fortress this house has ever seen." The cubs looked at all the materials with amazement, then let out a joyful chirp and began grabbing blankets. Immediately started planning the structure, talking about support systems and weight distribution. Even got excited, though she tried to hide it behind her serious expression. Helped them drape the big blanket over the top of the basket, creating a proper roof. She showed them how to use pillows to prop up the walls and how to tuck the edges of the blankets under the basket to keep everything stable. When they were done, the laundry basket was completely hidden under layers of fabric. It looked like a real tent now, a cozy den where three small aliens could sit together in warmth and comfort. Stepped back and looked at their creation. "What do you think? Is it good enough for a queen and her brave defenders?" Poked his head out from under the blanket. His eyes were shining with happiness. "It is perfect," he said. "It is the best fortress in the whole galaxy." Laughed softly. "I think you might be right." She left the cubs to enjoy their fortress and walked back toward the living room. As she went, she could hear them laughing and chattering behind her. The sound filled the house with life and warmth, and felt something loosen in her chest. She had missed having children in her home. She had missed the joy and the chaos and the pure creative energy that young ones brought with them. These alien cubs were different from human children in many ways. They had scales instead of skin. They had claws instead of fingernails. They came from a world where everything was hard and cold and serious. But in the most important way, they were exactly the same as every child had ever known. They wanted to play. They wanted to imagine. They wanted to build something wonderful out of nothing but blankets and dreams. And that thought was something beautiful. Ambassador Al noticed that her cubs were missing about an hour after they had slipped away. She was in the middle of explaining harvest customs to Ben when she suddenly stopped speaking and looked around the room. "Where are my children?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of concern. Ben glanced at the empty spot on the floor where the cubs had been sitting. They must have gone exploring. Children do that, probably found them already. As if summoned by her name, appeared in the doorway. She had a strange expression on her face, a mixture of joy and something else that Al could not identify. "The cubs are fine," said. "They are in the laundry room. You should come and see what they have been doing." Al rose from her chair with the smooth grace of her species. She followed down the hallway with Ben walking behind them. As they approached the laundry room, Al could hear sounds coming from inside. Strange sounds, high-pitched chirps and clicks that she recognized as laughter. Her cubs were laughing. Al stepped into the doorway and stopped. Her amber eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open slightly. For a long moment she could not speak. The laundry basket had been transformed. It was buried under blankets and pillows, creating a soft mountain in the middle of the room. From inside the structure came the sound of her children playing, actually playing, pretending, using their imaginations. This was something that cubs did not do. It was something they were taught not to do from the moment they could understand words. Imagination was considered a weakness on her world. It was a distraction from practical learning. Good children focused on reality. They studied and trained and prepared for useful work. But here were her cubs, hiding inside a human storage container, pretending to be rulers of a make-believe kingdom. Ben appeared beside her with 2 small boxes in his hands. "I brought them juice boxes," he said. "I figured they might be thirsty." "Juice boxes," Al repeated. She did not know what those were. Ben showed her the small rectangular containers. "They are drinks for children. You poke the straw through the top and suck the liquid out. Kids love them." He walked toward the blanket fortress and knocked gently on the side. "Room service," he called out in a playful voice. "I have drinks for the brave defenders of the fortress." A corner of the blanket lifted, and his face appeared. When he saw his mother standing in the doorway, his expression changed from joy to fear in an instant. "Mother," he said, his voice small and worried, "we are sorry. We did not mean to cause trouble." Al did not know what to say. She looked at her son's face, at the fear in his eyes, and she felt something twist in her chest. He was afraid of her. He was afraid that she would be angry with him for playing, for having fun, for being a child. What kind of culture, she wondered suddenly, made children afraid to enjoy themselves? Stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Al's arm. "They have been having the most wonderful time," she said softly. "They are so creative and imaginative. You should be proud of them." "Proud?" Al said. The word felt strange in her mouth. "On my world, this behavior would be considered shameful. Cubs are meant to be learning, not playing with household items." "But they are learning," said. "They are learning how to think creatively. They are learning how to work together. They are learning how to see possibilities instead of limitations. Those are important skills for any species." Al was quiet. She watched as Ben handed the juice boxes to her cubs, showing them how to insert the straws. The children's eyes went wide with delight as they figured out the simple technology. They chirped with excitement as the sweet liquid flowed into their mouths. Such a small thing, Al thought. A tiny box of juice with a straw, but to her children it was an amazing discovery, something new and wonderful to explore. She thought about her own childhood on the. She could not remember ever playing. She could not remember ever using her imagination just for fun. From her earliest memories, she had been training and studying and preparing for her future role in society. That was what all children did. But had she ever been happy? Had she ever felt the pure joy that she could see on her cubs' faces right now? She could not remember feeling that way, not ever. Had brought something else from the house, a small handheld device that she called a flashlight. She showed the cubs how to turn it on and off, and their eyes grew even wider as the bright beam of light appeared. "Now you can make shadow puppets," said. She held up her hand in front of the light and made shapes on the blanket wall. A dog, a bird, a rabbit. The cubs watched with amazement. then grabbed the flashlight and tried to copy her movements. His clawed hands did not make the same shapes as human hands, but he created his own figures. Strange alien creatures that danced on the fabric walls. "Look, Mother," he called out. "Look what I can make." Al walked closer to the fortress. She crouched down and looked at her youngest son through the gap in the blankets. His face was bright with happiness. His eyes sparkled with creative energy. He looked more alive than she had ever seen him. "That is very impressive," she said. The words felt awkward, but she meant them. Beamed at her praise. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and took her hand in his small clawed fingers. "Come inside the fortress, Mother," he said. "There is room for you too." Al hesitated. She was an ambassador, a dignitary, a representative of the collective. She could not climb into a laundry basket and play with blankets like a child. But her son was looking at her with such hope in his eyes, and was smiling at her with warm encouragement. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she had forgotten existed, something stirred. Something that remembered what it felt like to want to play. Slowly, carefully, Al lowered herself to the floor. She pushed aside the blanket and crawled into the fortress. Her cubs made room for her, and she settled onto the soft pile of towels in the center of the basket. It was warm, it was soft, it was unlike anything she had ever experienced on her. "This is very comfortable," she admitted. Snuggled against her side, and pressed close on her other side. For a moment, the four of them sat together in the cozy darkness of the blanket fort, surrounded by softness and warmth. Al could not remember the last time she had held her cubs like this. On her world, physical affection was not encouraged. Parents provided for their children and educated them, but cuddles and hugs were considered indulgent, unnecessary. But this did not feel unnecessary. This felt right. "Mother," said quietly, "are you angry with us?" Al wrapped her arms around her eldest daughter. "No, my child, I am not angry. I think perhaps I am learning something new today." "What are you learning?" asked. Al thought about the question for a long moment. Outside the fortress, she could hear the humans talking softly. Ben was telling about the harvest customs, finishing the explanation that Al had started earlier. Their voices were warm and gentle, full of the easy affection of a couple who had been together for many years. "I am learning," Al said slowly, "that there are many ways to live. The way of my people is not the only way. Perhaps it is not even the best way." She looked at the blanket walls around her, at the soft fabric that her cubs had arranged with such care and creativity. "Humans value things that we do not," she continued. "They value comfort, they value imagination, they value play. I always thought these things were weaknesses, but now I wonder if they are actually strengths." Looked up at her with his big amber eyes. "Does this mean we can play more often, Mother, even when we go home?" Al did not answer right away. She knew that bringing these ideas back to her would not be easy. The elders would disapprove. The other parents would question her judgment. There would be criticism and pushback. But looking at the joy on her children's faces, she knew that she had to try. "Yes," she said finally, "I think we can find ways to play, even at home." The cubs chirped with happiness, hugged her tightly, his small claws gentle against her scales, and joined in, wrapping their arms around their mother and each other. For the first time in her life, Al understood what it meant to feel truly close to her children, not as an authority figure, not as a teacher or provider, but as a family, as beings who loved each other and wanted to share happiness together. And all of this had started with a laundry basket. A simple woven container for dirty clothes had somehow become the most important diplomatic discovery of her entire mission to Earth. The humans had many great technologies. They had starships and computers and medical machines that could cure diseases. But this, Al thought, was their greatest invention of all: the ability to see magic in ordinary things. The sun was setting over the house, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The diplomatic visit was coming to an end. Ambassador Al stood in the living room with Ben and preparing to say goodbye. The cubs did not want to leave. Stood in the doorway of the laundry room, looking back at the fortress they had built. The blankets and pillows were still piled high around the basket, creating a cozy mountain of softness. He had spent the happiest hours of his life inside that structure. He had laughed and played and used his imagination for the first time ever. And now he had to leave it all behind. "We must go," Al said gently. "The shuttle is waiting. We have a long journey back to the ship." His eyes grew wet. On his world, crying was considered a great weakness. Cubs were taught to control their emotions from a very young age. But right now, standing on the edge of leaving this wonderful place, could not help the tears that formed. "I do not want to go," he whispered. Saw the little alien's sadness, and her heart ached for him. She remembered how her own children had felt when they had to leave something they loved. The pain of parting was the same for all young creatures, no matter what planet they came from. She exchanged a look with Ben. He nodded slightly, understanding what she was thinking. "Wait here for just a moment," said. "I will be right back." She disappeared through the door that led to the garage. The cubs watched her go, confused about what she was doing. Al looked at Ben with a questioning expression. "What is your wife doing?" she asked. Ben smiled. "You will see." A few minutes later returned. She was carrying something in her arms. It was a laundry basket, not the old one that the cubs had been playing with, but a new one. It was bright and clean, woven from plastic strips in cheerful colors of blue and green. She walked up to Al and held out the basket with both hands. "This is a gift for your cubs," she said. "Every child deserves a fortress of their own." Al stared at the basket. Among the gift-giving was a serious matter. Gifts were only exchanged between equals, and they carried deep meaning. To receive a gift was to accept a bond of friendship that could not easily be broken. "I do not know what to say," Al said softly. "This is most generous." "Please take it," said. "I have been watching your children today, and I have seen something beautiful. I have seen 3 young souls discovering joy for the first time. That is a precious thing, and I want to help it continue." Al reached out and took the basket with the formal 2-handed grip that her people used for honored gifts. The woven plastic was light in her hands, but the gift felt heavy with meaning. "I accept this gift," she said formally, "and I thank you for it, but more than that, I thank you for what you have shown us today." She looked at her cubs, who were gathered around her legs, staring at the new basket with wonder. "My people have always believed that play is a waste of time," Al continued. "We have taught our children that imagination is a distraction from important things, but today I have seen that imagination is one of the most important things of all. It allows us to see what could be, not just what is. It teaches us to hope and dream and create." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "When I return to I will include this in my report. I will tell the collective about the human practice of imaginative play. I will recommend that we study it further and consider adopting similar practices for our own young." Ben stepped forward. "That means a lot to us, Ambassador. We hope that your people will find as much joy in it as our children do." Al nodded solemnly. Then she looked at the basket in her hands and allowed herself a small smile. "I suspect," she said, "that this single basket will cause more change on my world than any diplomatic agreement ever could." The cubs said their goodbyes to Ben and hugged his legs tightly, his small arms wrapping around her as best they could. She bent down and hugged him back, feeling his scales warm under her hands. "Thank you," whispered. "Thank you for teaching us how to play." His eyes grew misty. "You are very welcome, little one. Now go and build many more fortresses and never stop imagining." The delegation walked out to their shuttle. The cubs carried the new basket between them, treating it like the precious treasure it was. As they climbed the ramp into the ship, looked back one last time and waved at the humans standing in the yard. Ben and waved back. They stood together, watching the shuttle door close and the ship rise slowly into the darkening sky. The lights of the craft flickered against the stars as it climbed higher and higher, until finally it was just a tiny point of light among millions of others. Then it was gone. Leaned against her husband's shoulder. "That was quite a visit," she said. Ben put his arm around her. "It certainly was. Who would have thought that a laundry basket could be so important?" Laughed softly. Children always know what matters most. They do not care about diplomatic protocols or cultural differences. They just want to play and be happy. They stood in silence for a while, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, a shuttle was carrying 3 alien cubs back to their ship, and somewhere on that shuttle, a simple woven basket was being guarded like the most valuable object in the universe. 3 months later, a report arrived at the Terran Federation headquarters. It was an official communication from the collective, signed by the High Council itself. Ben and received a copy of it through diplomatic channels. The report spoke at length about human child-rearing practices. It described the concept of imaginative play in great detail. It explained how human children used ordinary objects to create extraordinary worlds, and it recommended that the collective adopt similar practices in their own educational systems. But the most interesting part of the report was at the end. It was a section written by Ambassador Al herself. "Before my visit to Earth," she wrote, "I believed that the humans' greatest strength was their technology. I was wrong. Their greatest strength is their imagination. They look at the universe and see not what is, but what could be. They teach their children to dream, and those dreams grow into innovations that change the world. I have seen my own cubs transformed by a single day in a human home. They are happier now than they have ever been. They play and laugh and imagine, and they are closer to me than they were before. Our family has been strengthened by the lessons we learned from a kind human couple and their gift of a simple woven basket. I recommend that the collective begin formal trade negotiations for soft woven containers from Earth. These items may seem trivial, but their impact on our young could be profound. Our children deserve to know the joy of building fortresses from blankets. They deserve to experience the magic of turning ordinary things into extraordinary adventures." The report caused a sensation among some elders resisted the idea, calling it foolish and undisciplined, but the younger generations embraced it eagerly. Within a year, woven baskets had become one of the most requested trade items from Earth. Human toy companies began producing special versions designed for cubs, with materials safe for their claws and scales. And on a distant planet, in a home that was slowly becoming softer and more comfortable, 3 young aliens grew up knowing how to play. They built fortresses and castles and spaceships. They used their imaginations to explore worlds that existed only in their minds. They laughed and dreamed and hoped. And whenever they looked at the basket that sat in a place of honor in their family's living space, they remembered the kind humans who had given it to them. They remembered Ben, and who had opened their home and their hearts to a group of strangers from across the stars. Kept that first basket for his entire life. Even when he grew old and became a respected leader among his people, he never got rid of it. It sat in his office, worn and faded from years of use, still bearing the tiny claw marks from that first magical day when he had discovered what it meant to play. And sometimes, when the work of leadership became too heavy and the problems of the universe seemed too big, would look at that old basket and remember. He would remember the warmth of soft towels and the laughter of his siblings. He would remember the kind smile of a human woman who saw value in imagination. He would remember the pure joy of building a fortress out of nothing but a basket and some blankets. And he would know, deep in his heart, that the humans had given his people something more valuable than any technology or resource. They had given them the gift of wonder. The end.